My best friend stole my fiance and my business, and 5 years later she showed up at my door begging for money. The door of my office opened slowly, and a woman who once wore the most expensive shoes on our street stood in front of me, barefoot, in dirty clothes, with eyes I would have recognized after 1,000 years. She held out her hand and said one word, "Please." And in that second my mind traveled 15 years back, to when the two of us were best friends, and nobody on earth could have convinced me that this exact woman would one day take everything I had. If this story has already grabbed something inside you, drop the word karma in the comments right now, because it only gets worse from here. This is the story of two girls who grew up in the same courtyard, went to the same school, and dreamed of the same things: a business of their own, a home of their own, a husband who would love them for real. One mother sewed dresses to order in a small room on the ground floor, and the other sold fabric at the market 2 blocks away, and it was there, among the bolts of silk and cotton, that the two girls first met when they were 7 years old. From that day they were inseparable, doing homework together, surviving first heartbreaks together, crying together when one of their fathers died, and laughing together so loudly that the neighbors banged on the wall. When they turned 22, they opened a business together, a small beauty salon in the center of town, where one of them handled bridal makeup and styling, and the other took care of dresses and accessories. Clients came in crowds because one of them had a real gift. She could look at a bride's face for a few seconds and already know exactly which shade would make her glow forever. The other woman was beautiful too, arguably even more beautiful. With a slim waist and long hair, she spent hours styling every morning. But for some reason, men always looked at her friend first. It started quietly. A groom's brother would come to pick up a suit and then linger at the makeup counter for 20 extra minutes with no real reason. A client who only meant to buy a tie would suddenly ask for the makeup artist's number. She kept smiling, kept wrapping purchases in paper, and nobody, not even her closest friend, noticed how something inside that smile was slowly hardening, the way water turns to ice not all at once but layer by layer. A year before the wedding that would change everything, something happened that she never forgot. A young man from a neighboring town came into the salon looking for a gift for his sister's engagement, and she spent almost an hour with him, showing fabrics, suggesting styles, laughing at his jokes. When her friend stepped out of her own room to say hello, the young man stopped mid-sentence, looked at her as if he had seen something he had never seen before, and quietly said to the woman beside him, "Does every woman on this street look like this, or is it just the two of them?" He was looking only at her friend when he said it. He left with her friend's number, promising to send new clients from his town. She stood there holding fabric she had already folded, smiling the smile she had trained herself to wear, and said nothing. That night, alone in her room, she replayed the moment until it stopped feeling like an accident and started feeling like a pattern. Around that same time, a wealthy young man asked her friend to marry him. He owned one of the biggest event rental companies in the city, two of the most sought-after wedding halls, and he was, by everyone's count, a few years younger than her. He pursued her properly, flowers, calls, showing up with food at odd hours because he had heard she hadn't eaten. What she never told anyone was that she liked him far more than she was comfortable admitting. But when he proposed, she said no. "You are still finding yourself," she told him. "I need a man who has already arrived." He didn't argue. He simply nodded and kept coming around anyway, sending brides from his halls whenever one of them asked who did the best bridal look in the city, showing up with small gifts for no occasion at all. He never brought up the proposal again, and everyone assumed he had quietly moved on. He hadn't moved anywhere at all. Not long after, another man entered her friend's life, older, polished, a bank executive whose presence made rooms go quiet when he walked in. They met at a wedding where she had done the bride's makeup, and within 3 months, half the neighborhood was already talking about the ceremony to come. Through every one of those months, Her friends smiled and helped and hosted planning meetings in her own shop, telling anyone who would listen how happy she was for her best friend. And underneath all of it, the same cold arithmetic kept running in her mind. Her friend gets the man, her friend gets the money, her friend gets the whole room every single time, and she is the one standing beside her, holding her own shadow. There is a kind of jealousy that announces itself loudly. Hers wore a smile and carried gifts instead. 2 weeks before the traditional ceremony, she closed her shop early and took a bus to the edge of town, to a small unmarked store where an old woman everyone simply called the healer sold leaves, oils, soaps, and things people didn't ask too many questions about. "I need something," she said. "Something to change how a person looks, not to kill her, just enough to slow her down." The old woman studied her for a long moment, the way old women study people who are about to ask for something they will later regret. "Slow her down for what? That isn't my business," the old woman said, almost laughing. "Everything that walks through my door becomes my business the moment you open your mouth," she continued. "You want to touch someone's beauty, so ask yourself first why her beauty feels like theft to you, because it isn't her beauty doing the stealing. It's something inside you that was already hungry long before you ever met her." She didn't answer. She hadn't come there for wisdom. "You are asking me for something that cannot be done halfway," the old woman went on. "Once it starts working, it will not ask your permission to stop. I don't care. I need it before her ceremony." The old woman wrapped an ordinary-looking bar of soap in brown paper and pressed it into her palm. "Whatever you send out carrying harm in its hands," she said quietly, "will remember the hand that sent it, long after it has finished with the hand it was sent to." She didn't listen. She rarely listened to warnings that arrived after her mind was already made up. 3 days before the ceremony, she visited her friend's shop with a small gift bag. "For your skin before Saturday," she said, "fresh from my new supplier. The good stuff, not the market version." She smiled the entire time. "You have to glow, you have to shine, my sister. The whole street is coming." Her friend hugged her. "You always take care of me. That's what sisters are for." 2 days before the ceremony, the bride used the soap. On the day of the ceremony, as the groom's family began to arrive, her friend's skin started to itch in patches along her neck and arms, small enough at first to blame on the heat. By the time the groom's mother arrived to inspect the bride her son had chosen, the patches had spread and deepened, pale blotches rising against the skin as if something were eating the color out from underneath. The room noticed before the bride herself did, and that was the cruelest part. She saw it in the faces around her before she fully felt it. Conversations dropped mid-sentence. The groom's mother's smile froze in place and never moved again. Her friend was the first to reach her, dabbing at her arm with a wet cloth, loud with concern, asking if someone should call a doctor. Sit down, let me look at it," she kept repeating, and every eye in the room turned toward the friend playing nurse, while the bride quietly fell apart in front of her new family. Nobody thought to ask why the cloth never actually touched the spreading patches directly. "What is this?" the groom's mother asked, not unkindly at first, but not kindly either. "Is it contagious?" "I don't know what's happening, ma'am. I used a new soap 2 days ago." "A new soap?" The older woman's voice sharpened. "In the very week of your own ceremony, you decided to try something new on your skin." The groom stood completely still through all of it. He didn't defend her, he didn't attack her. He simply watched his mother's face, then watched the room, and made the calculation men like him were always making. What will this cost me? And can I afford it? By evening, the engagement was quietly, politely, and permanently withdrawn. "It isn't that I don't care about you," he told her at the door, unable to look at her directly. "But my mother, the family name, you understand." She didn't understand anything. She stood in her doorway in her half-finished dress, watching the man she was supposed to marry in 3 weeks walk away because her own skin had betrayed her on the one day it couldn't afford to. Her friend came the next morning wailing louder than anyone, holding her hands, calling it wickedness, calling it enemies, calling it anything except what it actually was. It's our enemies. Oh, it will not be well with them. The devil is a liar. The market has never once in its history kept its mouth shut about another woman's misfortune, and within a week the story had grown 3 new versions of itself, each one crueler than the last. Some said she had a hidden illness she'd been concealing from the groom's family. Some said a jilted client had cursed her. One woman swore she had always suspected that beauty like that was borrowed from somewhere it shouldn't have been borrowed from. Clients stopped booking her for weddings because no bride wants the woman doing her face to be the subject of a curse rumor on her own big day. Within 2 months, an appointment book that had once been completely full was empty enough to hear the silence in it. The young businessman kept showing up anyway, still sending clients her way, staying close, saying nothing about what had happened, asking for nothing in return. She barely noticed him. She was too busy disappearing. If you're enjoying this story so far, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button, because what happens to both of these women next is going to test everything you think you know about who actually won that day. 6 months after the ceremony that ended everything, the groom proposed to her former best friend. The town called it fitting. She had been there for him, they said, through the whole embarrassment, comforting him, listening to him complain about his mother's disappointment. Nobody thought to ask why the comforting friend had also been the one who supplied the soap. The wedding was loud, expensive, and photographed from every angle. She wore white and stood exactly where she had always wanted to stand, in the center of a room, with no one's shadow falling across her. For the first year, she believed she had gotten everything she wanted, and that first year wasn't all darkness, which made it harder to name later. He bought her a new car, called her his queen in front of his colleagues, and for a while he looked like a man who had chosen well and knew it. Then the phone calls started coming with conditions attached. He wanted to know where she was at every hour. He didn't like her going to her shop alone. He didn't like her old friends calling the house. "Why does that friend still call you every week?" he asked one evening, scrolling through her phone without asking. "What are the two of you discussing that I'm not allowed to hear?" "She's my friend. Women talk," she said. "You're a married woman now. Married women shouldn't be close with single girls, my queen." She laughed it off the first time, the way you laugh off something that hasn't yet shown you its full shape. What had once looked like devotion in those early months, slowly and then all at once, began to look like a leash tightening 1 notch at a time. What she had never told anyone, not her mother, not the few friends she had left, was that months into the courtship, terrified she was about to lose him the same way her friend had, she had gone back to that same old healer. "I need him to never want to leave me," she had said, "whatever it takes." The old woman looked at her the way she had the first time. "You're asking me again for something that cannot be done halfway." This time she hadn't even hesitated. What she didn't know was that mixing that oil into his food would strip away the last of his restraint and hand her a man whose love now needed to own the thing it loved completely, or turn into something else entirely. By the 2nd year of the marriage, there were things she covered with long sleeves that had nothing to do with fashion. She tried once simply to ask him for a little space. "I just want to visit my mother for the weekend, that's all. And leave me here alone after everything I've given you. You are not going anywhere without me. Do you hear me?" She heard him. She always heard him. That was the problem. Some part of her, the part that remembered mixing that oil into his food with her own hands, believed she had no right to complain about a devotion she herself had gone looking for. Meanwhile, her former best friend was learning how to survive being looked at differently. The patches on her skin never fully went away. Doctors gave it a name, something about the body's own defenses turning against the color in her skin. No cure, Only management, only time. She stopped waiting for it to fix itself and instead started relearning her own face in the mirror the way she had once taught brides to love theirs. It was slow. She lost more clients before she gained any back. Landlords who once gave her leeway on rent suddenly wanted their money on the exact day it was due. A supplier who had extended her credit for years began asking her to pay up front, in a tone that told her exactly what he had heard. But one stubborn young bride refused every suggestion to use someone else. "Nobody is touching my face but her," the bride told her own mother. "If people want to gossip, let them gossip somewhere else." That one loyal client became 2, then 5, then a small steady list of women who didn't care what her arms looked like, as long as their weddings looked like magic. 2 years after the broken engagement, the young businessman who had never stopped showing up finally said what he had been holding back for years. He came to her shop on an ordinary afternoon. No flowers this time, just himself. "I know you never asked me to keep showing up," he said, "but I need you to actually hear this, not just be polite about it." She crossed her arms without meaning to, the way she had started doing since the marks appeared. "Maybe I wasn't serious enough back then," he said. "I don't know. What I do know is I've watched you lose everything and rebuild it with your own hands, twice now, and I never once stopped wanting to be standing next to you while you did it. Not because you're broken and need saving. I don't think you're broken at all. I think you're the strongest person on this whole street, and I was too young and too proud to say that properly the first time." She didn't answer right away. She was carrying a question that had been sitting in her chest for weeks, and she finally let it out. "Is it because of this?" she asked, touching her own arm. "Because you think I have nowhere else to go now, because you feel sorry for me?" He didn't flinch. "I asked you to marry me before any of this happened. Back when your appointment book was full and half the city wanted your hands on their face. If anything, you have less reason to trust that I mean it now, and I still mean it just the same. I didn't fall in love with your skin. I fell in love with the way you talk to nervous brides until they stop shaking. None of that changed. The rest is just skin." She laughed despite herself, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "You've been rehearsing that for 2 years," she said. "I just kept losing my nerve," he answered. She married him 8 months later in a small ceremony with no drama and no room for gossip, because everyone who came for her. The night before her wedding, her former best friend showed up at her door, unannounced, uninvited, with years of secrets finally too heavy to keep carrying alone. She told her everything, the soap, the ceremony, and then, because the dam had already broken, she told her about the potion too, about what her husband had become, about the marks under her own sleeves that she had been hiding from everyone, including herself. "I didn't know he would become this," she said, crying now, with no performance left in it. "I only wanted him to love me the way he loved you. I didn't know it would turn into this." The bride listened to all of it without moving from where she stood. "I'm not going to forgive you tonight," she finally said, her voice steady in a way that frightened her former friend more than shouting would have. "And honestly, I don't think I'm going to forgive you at all. What you did to me, you did on purpose. You watched me lose an engagement, my clients, my name in this town, and you comforted me with the same hands that ruined me. That isn't something I owe you absolution for just because it's inconvenient for you now too. I understand, and I'm genuinely sorry that this is what your life has become. But I need you to hear this clearly, because I'm only going to say it once. Hearing it doesn't change what you did to me, or what I owe you now, which is nothing. You made your choices with your own 2 hands, the soap, and whatever it was you did to make that man want you the way he wanted me. I didn't put either of those things in your hands, so I'm not going to be the one who cleans up what they became. You're going to have to find your own way out of the life you built, the same way I had to find my own way out of the one you destroyed." She left that night exactly as unresolved as she had arrived, and one truth heavier than when she came: there would be no rescue coming from that house. The bride married the man who had waited for her the very next afternoon, in the smaller of his 2 wedding halls. Barely 50 chairs set out, nothing on the walls beyond white flowers, because he had told his own staff plainly that this one wasn't for show. Her arms were bare. She had stopped covering them months earlier. When the officiant asked if anyone present had reason the two should not be joined, the only sound in that hall was the quiet hum of the air conditioning. 3 months into her own marriage, news reached her the way news always travels in a small market, sideways, through someone who heard it from someone else. Her former best friend had tried to leave her husband. Nobody had the full story, not even the neighbors who whispered it loudest, but the pieces that came together painted enough of a picture. After the night of the confession, he had grown different toward his wife, quieter, more watchful, as if some part of him sensed she had gone somewhere without him and come back changed. Within weeks he had cameras installed in every corner of the house, telling her it was for their safety, for peace of mind. She thanked him for caring so much. She waited nearly 4 months for the right moment, and when it came, a business trip that was supposed to keep him away for 3 days, she packed one bag and left before dawn, making it as far as the gate before his phone told him what his own eyes couldn't see from hundreds of kilometers away. He was back within hours. He didn't shout. That was the part that frightened her most. He sat across from her at the dining table and told her, in the same calm voice he had once used to call her his queen, "I told you, you can never leave me. If you try this again, you won't like what I do." He wasn't wrong. Desperate, she went back to the old healer one more time, asking if there was anything left to undo what she had done years earlier. The old woman didn't even reach for her leaves that day. There is no undoing a lie once it has become the only truth a man knows how to hold on to, she said. What you gave him was never love. It was a leash dressed up as devotion, and a leash doesn't loosen itself just because the hand holding it grows tired. What you started, you will now live inside. There was no undoing it. Whatever she had poured into that food years earlier had long since belonged to him completely, the way a fire belongs to whatever it has already burned. After that failed attempt, the house got smaller in every way that mattered. Her phone stayed in his pocket, not hers. The household staff were given new instructions about who was allowed to leave and when. Her shops were sold within the month, and the money moved into an account she could not touch. Her old supplier contacts cut off one by one. What had once dressed itself as love no longer bothered pretending. The bride heard all of this in fragments, the way a whole town eventually hears everything, and she didn't go looking for the rest of the details. She had already said everything she needed to say the night before her own wedding, and she had meant every word of it, including the part where she owed her nothing further. She was no longer a woman who spent her strength on doors that never belonged to her to open. So she built her own life. Her shop grew. Her marriage settled into the kind of steady, unremarkable happiness that never makes for gossip, which in its own way was the loudest thing that Market had ever witnessed. Not a public downfall for anyone, just a quiet, well-earned life that no longer needed anyone's permission to shine. If you have ever been protected quietly, without telling a single soul what you were doing, while people around you assumed you were simply going along with everything, drop the words, "I understand this," in the comments below. This community knows exactly what that takes. 5 years after that wedding night confession, on an ordinary afternoon, the bell above the shop door rang, and the woman standing there barefoot in worn clothes was the same woman who once had 2 shops, a wedding with photographers from every angle, and a husband who called her his queen in front of colleagues. Everything had finally collapsed around her. The marriage, the money, the house, the man who once controlled every hour of her day had, in the end, discarded her the same way he discarded everything he decided he no longer needed. She stood in the doorway with her hand out and said, "Please." The market still talks about the two of them sometimes, when a new bride's mother wants to warn her daughter about envy, or when someone needs reminding that the thing you send out into another person's life rarely stays a stranger to your own. A bar of soap cannot spoil what was never truly yours to take. A potion cannot buy devotion that was never freely given, and it cannot be bought back once it has curdled into something else entirely. And a friendship, once it has been used as a weapon, does not heal simply because one woman finally finds the honesty to admit what she did with it. If you followed this story all the way to the end, thank you for sitting with me through it. Drop a comment and tell me, do you think she should have helped, or was she right to protect her own peace once that door had already closed? I want to hear where you stand. And if this is your first time here, welcome to the family. Hit subscribe because there's another story waiting for you right now.